to my podcast, Holistic Conversations, with your host, Mamina Das. Join me in my journey, in all of our journey, because we are all unique and we are the universe. Welcome to Holistic Conversations. Okay, namaste everyone. Namaste, Jeff. Good afternoon.
Same, I mean.
It's so nice to have you. And we are very happy for having you and learning about your experience, It's very, very exciting, but it's also very challenging. We will listen from you the rest of the story. To start with, I would like to read something like he is a hitchhiker about which he has written a book, and he does trekking. He also has travel and mountaineering expedition planning. He is the president of Basa Village Foundation, about which he is going to share something which we are going to learn today. And he's an author. He has written so many books. We are going to learn about that as well. So Jeff, welcome. Welcome to our show. And
Thank you.
yeah, over to you. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Mamina. Where would you like me to start?
If I get a chance, I always try to ask about your childhood, If you are okay with that, then we can go just a little bit to your childhood and then we can come back to all of your other things.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a small town in northern Indiana. It's not that small anymore, but it's Goshen, Indiana. And it was a sort of town that everybody knew everybody else. My family, when I was growing up, I was the fifth generation to live there. My great great grandparents were founding pioneers of the community. And I had one older brother who was just 14 months older than me, but big enough to always beat me up when he felt like it. And went through the public schools there in Goshen, Indiana, and you alluded to hitchhiking. When it was time to start college, I really didn't want to stay in school, but my parents convinced me to give college a try. So I went for one semester and then dropped out and walked to the edge of town, stuck out my thumb and started hitchhiking across the country. And so I hitchhiked from northern Indiana as far south as you can possibly go, which is Key West, Florida, and then over to New Orleans to spend some time and experience Mardi Gras, and then hitchhiked back home. But then eventually I went back to college, and in fact, sort of had a complete turnaround, fell in love with learning, graduated from the University of Chicago, then and I spent one summer studying in England, uh, went to law school, graduated from Indiana University Law School, and went to seminary, Christian Theological Seminary, some years later while I was practicing law. So I went from a kid who had really had enough of school by the time he got out of high school to someone who couldn't stop going to school. And I actually taught as an adjunct professor for a number of years at two different universities here in where I live, Indianapolis, Marian University and Butler University. So, um, what else would you like to know?
That's great. I mean, that explorer in you was always alive, and you have arrived there finally.
Yeah, I did enjoy having really extraordinary experiences and meeting people I would have never met in my small hometown when I hitchhiked across the country. And I guess it kind of lit a spark because after that I did a motorcycle trip all across North America. Traveled all around Europe and have scuba dived all through the Caribbean, did solo kayak expeditions in the Pacific and in Greece and the Aegean, did mountaineering and trekking in the Nepal and India Himalayas. And so, yeah, uh, that's been a big part of my life. But now I've gotten old and kind of lazy, I guess, and those sort of big expedition type traveling adventures I put aside, and my wife and I, instead of me going off on those adrenaline junkie type experiences almost every weekend. She and I pick out a small town or some interesting place to visit here in our home state of Indiana. And we visit and then we research it and write up about the history of the town, the experience, and we're working on a book together, which will eventually be about the small towns and the unique little kind of mini cultures in Indiana.
That sounds really interesting and exciting as well, it's like you're digging into something.
Well, well, yeah, we're doing that, although I can't say it's nearly as exciting as climbing a mountain in the Himalayas or solo uh, sea kayaking from island to island in the Pacific, but it's interesting and it's fun to travel with my wife because so much of my major travels were solo. And so when I would be off on a mountaineering expedition, she would either be at home or she'd go off to England or Italy and explore museums and shops and art galleries while I'm struggling up mountains.
Well, I think the word struggle is like a very playful experience for you because um, that's your calling. Like you said, finding out about the cultures and the little towns is not as exciting as climbing the mountains. So that says it all.
True.
Uh, let's listen something about Basa Village Foundation.
Yeah. So the Basa Village Foundation, we work with a particular community in a remote area of Nepal, and obviously it's called Basa. Uh, and Basa is a small village with only about 300 and some people in it, but it is the kind of main village. There's a few other little uh, tiny hamlets around it. And so I got to involved with that community through a mountaineering expedition. The outfitter company that I was working with, which is called Adventure Geotreks, and here's their logo. Uh, all of the guys in the company, our porters, cooks, guides, were all from the Basa area, and this is back in 2006. and they asked me if I would be willing to raise or donate $5,000 for their village school. And they had a little village school that had 3 grades, and they wanted to add a 4th and a 5th grade. And for $5,000, we could add 2 classrooms, all the materials needed for a 4th and 5th grade, and we could pay 2 teachers' salaries for 3 years. And that just seemed like something I couldn't say no to, because for, $5,000 to give 85 children 2 more years of education seemed like a really good deal. So I agreed. And instead of donating the money myself, I thought it would be a good idea to develop a group of donors, mostly other truckers and climbers that I'd done expeditions with. And so that was the start of the foundation. Initially, we used a church that I was kind of friendly with, which is called First Friends Indianapolis, a Quaker church, to funnel the money through so that Americans could get their charitable tax donation. But then after a couple of years, I, with, of course, the help of legal counsel, we registered as a 501c3 tax-exempt foundation. And since that first school project, the foundation has funded a whole nother school building, computers for the school, a water system for the village, an electrical system for the village, smokeless stoves for every home in the village. There is the government did eventually build a medical clinic nearby, but they did not provide restrooms or toilets. So we funded adding to the construction of the medical clinic toilets and a compost toilet for the village. And then all sorts of smaller various projects like LED lighting, shoes and parkas, for cold weather. And our actual biggest fundraiser was back in 2015, when 2 really terrible earthquakes devastated a huge part of Nepal, and the village was damaged. So we contributed $40,000, which, again, it doesn't seem like that much money, but it was enough to buy all the materials needed to rebuild and repair the homes. There were, I think something like 30 of the approximately 80 homes in the village area were damaged, and so the villagers with that could buy the materials they needed. And one of the interesting things in our arrangement is there's a sister foundation in Nepal, which is run by guys that work or own and work for Adventure GeoTreks. Their sister foundation is the chairman is a guy named Niru Rai, and he and I became very good friends through the trekking and climbing. And he and I agreed that once we got through the school project and decided we were going to continue working together to develop the infrastructure around Basa, that the villagers would have to provide all the labor themselves. The Basa Village Foundation in Nepal would provide supervision and expertise, and would hire, if needed, an engineer or an expert consultant. And the Basa Village Foundation USA we would also provide advice, expertise, but our primary function would be fundraising and to provide financing. But so the neat thing is the villagers really own all of these projects. The outsiders like me, we don't own anything. The school has a school board. The water and electrical system has a utility board. It's all the local people. So they own it, they run it, they manage it. Many of the teachers in the school are from Basa. Uh, and then currently we're working on a project which is really the first. It's different because it's a commercial project. We figured out, and when I say we, it's really the local people figured out that after the earthquakes and then after COVID, um, the only income that villagers have is from working in the tourist industry, working as, porters and guides and cooks, uh, because there is no commerce in the area other than the provided by the trekking and mountaineering companies that hire local people to do those jobs. And so when the tourism dries up or is really reduced, like from earthquakes or COVID, it's a real struggle for the villagers. They're all subsistence farmers, um, but it's dicey to depend entirely on being able to grow all of your own food and take care of all of your needs, just through what you can do locally without any actual money income. So this project is a co-op business, which is raising goats and pigs. And so the goats will provide milk, yogurt, cheese, which can be sold, and the pigs will provide meat. So we're working on developing a sufficient herd that can be profitable of those two animals. And we had the first buy of the animals last year, and now we're doing a second round. And unfortunately, a number of the pigs died. They got swine flu. So we have to replace those, and we have to build the herd up to the point where it's profitable, and that it's not just one more subsistence form of agriculture. As we think after this second year of developing the two herds, it'll be on the verge of actually being profitable.
Wow, that's exciting. It's like you're building up that area, commercially, education wise, and economic wise, and helping them live a better life. And that's amazing.
Yeah, that's the goal. When I first visited the village, which was in 2008, there was no running water, there was no electricity. The road, the nearest road was a 4-day trek over two 10,000-foot high laws, and or passes. And so the people were basically living about the same way that they had lived for 500 years. There were no vehicles in the village. The farming was done with hand plows or water buffaloes. And on the one hand, it was beautiful and it was self-sustaining, but a problem had developed, which was the population was increasing. And part of the reason the population was increasing is because there was a medical clinic a 2-hour walk away in that area, the largest village, which is called Sambare. And so because for the first time, the first generation, people were getting Western medicine, they were living longer, and the rate of infant mortality had gone way down. As traditionally, 3 out of 4 babies would die. And so the population remained very stable for generations, but it reversed, and 3 out of 4 babies were living. And so they had a huge, baby boom spike in the population, and the subsistence farming could not support it. So the villagers figured out, well, we need a school. We need to give kids education and skills that the ones that are going to have to leave and go to the city will be employable. And that's kind of what started the whole process of, okay, we need a school. And then they well, now we have this connection with these Americans, and we can look across this huge valley and we see other villages that have lights, and we'd like that. And the teachers especially wanted lights so that they and their students could study at night, because it's very hard to study if you're studying around a campfire, which is what they had before. So, one, and then, just one led to another. And now the village is at a point where it has all of the kind of basic infrastructure that, first world communities have, is just on a much lower level. Like for the water, they don't have internal plumbing. They have a tap outside of their house. And the electricity runs off of a turbine in the nearby stream. And so if the flow of water is reduced, then the electricity is reduced. But they have cell phone service now. The road now comes to the village, so they can have vehicles, and there's a bus that comes occasionally, so they can get into Kathmandu without having to walk for days and days. So it's really transformed. I mean, the community is in a way very different now than when I first visited, but it looks the same. If you look at it, you see pictures of it, it looks exactly the way it did when I first visited, and it looks exactly the way it did 100 years ago.
Yeah, but it's work in progress, You cannot say that you don't see change. You are talking about
Oh
big
yeah.
changes that have taken place. Whether it is seen or not seen, um, it all depends on perspective. But whatever you have shared, I feel that it has progressed. There was progress.
Well, yeah, and the villagers are very grateful. It used to be the only way we could stay in touch was when I would, go a 30-hour plane trip, and then, to walk days, or drive to the end of the highway and then walk for 4 or 5 days. But then they got uh, internet in Kathmandu, and so some of the villagers had moved to Kathmandu so we could communicate by email, and then eventually the village got internet so we can communicate by email, and then the village got uh, cell phone service. So it's now it's so much easier to communicate than it was. Although during fall and spring trekking season, because most of the men are working for a few months off on the expeditions, then it becomes difficult to communicate again because they're, up in the mountains. And there's a lot of areas that still, don't have cell phone service.
Yeah, but it has started to. I mean, you are working on it. People started availing these services, and it will take some time. It's a matter of time.
Well, yeah, and it's been, it's been really fulfilling to have this connection and to see the changes and to feel the appreciation. Um, but one of the concerns that I've shared with my partner, Niru Rai, and the other members of the Nepal Foundation is, how do we protect the culture? And, so far, it seems like the people who've stayed in the village, and of course, a fair number of young people have left the village, and like the 4 of my best friends who were the guides that I worked with have moved to Kathmandu, including Niru. Um, and so, a fair number of the people from Basa have moved to Kathmandu. But those that have stayed, really have maintained their traditional culture. And that was important to all of us, that we didn't want to, on the one hand, we wanted to bring the things from the modern world that would make life better and improve kind of the basic um, quality of life, uh, but without changing their really beautiful traditional culture. And so far, I think that's succeeded, but it's a question of each generation. Will each generation maintain that? And just a quick little story to illustrate is kind of funny. So when we did the smokeless stove project, well, the fire pit in each of the homes was the central gathering place, and it actually had meaning beyond just where you cooked and heated. There were sacred stones around the fire pit, and the stones determined where people would sit. Like there was the father stone and the mother stone, the children's stone, and the honored guest stones, and the not so the regular guest stone, and then you would sit across from those stones. And so I was sort of, worried that, okay, well, if you get these smokeless stoves and you put the stove on top of the fire pit, then is that going to, change that tradition? And so after the stoves were all installed, and I was back in the village the next year, I asked, one of my friends there, Ganesh Rai, said, "Well, Jeff Dye, we know where the stones are, even if they're under this stove." Oh, yeah, okay, I guess that makes sense. So uh, some of the families put the stove in the corner of I mean, it's a one-room house in the corner. Others put it on top of the traditional fire pit. Um, and so, anyway, whichever way wherever they decided to put the stove, the sacred stones remained there and were still honored the same way.
This is really interesting because in India, I, I also belong to a village, like my father grew up in a village. He did his schooling and everything from his village school. So we also had this tradition of having a fire pit in the veranda, we call that, where all the family members would sit and gather around. And there was a different cooking fire for making food, So we would make food in the kitchen, we would bring the food, and we would serve near the fire pit. And everybody, they had their own space, like my grandfather's spot was his spot. Nobody's going to sit there. My father's spot was his spot. Nobody's going to sit there. So we share the same kind of childhood, I guess, same culture. After listening from you, I was just thinking, oh, yeah, I mean, I can relate to it, We
Hmm.
have seen this so closely. But But now I think things have changed a lot because not many people live in the village. They moved out of the village for all this facility to avail, for education, for better work and stuff like that. But those who have stayed, they are still with the same celebration, same tradition and culture. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a
What?
mix. It's always a mix.
Yeah. What part of India is your family from?
East,
Which province?
Odisha.
I don't know. I don't know it. When I was in India, I spent my time in New Delhi and then up
That's
in
north.
Ladakh. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
and which
north.
was
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
But yeah, so there, I mean, India, like America, is so huge, and there's so much to see. I'd love to go back because I just got sort of two pieces of it, and I need more.
You will love it. Different state has different, what do you say? I can relate it to different flavor or different color. When you go to different state, you'll have different taste of different kind of culture, food, dress, hospitality, everything. Be a little bit different from state to state, province to province.
Well, if I can overcome my antipathy to doing those terribly long international flights again, then I'll go back to India.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, but it's okay. Sometime if you feel like, more than welcome to explore.
I had a wonderful time when I was there. It was actually in India was where I did my first Himalayan mountain climb. It wasn't in Nepal. The first time I went to Nepal, I did the trek to Mount Everest base camp, but then the next year I went back because I just fell in love with the Himalayas, and the climbing expedition I joined was going to Ladakh. So yeah, so India was my first experience of actual Himalayan climbing.
And how was it different?
Different than climbing in Nepal, or well,
Yeah.
it wasn't. I mean, a mountain is a mountain, and every mountain has its own unique features, and you have to figure out the proper route and all that kind of thing, and the proper equipment. But the experience of being up on a mountain and trekking to the mountain was similar. The one thing that was very different, though, in Ladakh that I never experienced in Nepal was we had to cross the Indus River, and it's a huge, very fast flowing river. And the way we were going to get across was in this little metal box, hand pulled on a wire. And that was very exciting. But the really scary part, so all of our group got across, and the last person to come across was our head guide. And his name was Searing. And so Searing is pulling, himself across, and all of a sudden we see him going very, very fast. And what had happened is because there's the ropes, there's a pulley at each end, and so the ropes are going like this. The lower rope was fraying and was actually about to break. And so he was going as fast as he could to get across. And literally, just as he got there and jumped out of the metal box, the rope broke. And I mean, if it had broken while he was over the river, I'm not sure he would have survived. But we would have definitely lost our guide because he would have been long far away. Um, so that was kind of interesting and scary. And another kind of funny event that I never experienced in Nepal one thing is very similar. Many of our campsites were in yak pastures. But we had one member of our group in Ladakh, Molly, and Molly was very fit. She was an outward bound instructor, so she'd spent a lot of times in the U.S. in the Rockies. Um, and she would some days hike in her sandals instead of trekking boots, to be more like to have sort of an experience more like our porters and guides, because many of them were wearing sandals. Uh, and so one night she decided she was going to sleep just out under the stars instead of in her tent. And what she didn't realize is that the yaks were going to come back into the pasture during the night. And so they did, and a bunch of yaks found this little rolled up bundle in their pasture and just started nosing it around. And so Molly in her sleeping bag got to get rolled around by yaks during the night until she finally got up and ran and jumped back in her tent. But yeah, even though we would sometimes sleep in yak pastures in Nepal, nobody tried doing that.
Yeah, that's so many different experiences you have. Would you like to talk something about fear? Like, what what are you afraid of, or how did you see fear? Uh, were you afraid? Did you take it like, okay, let's just handle it, or like,
Yeah, I this it sounds kind of braggadocious, I suppose, but I don't experience fear a lot. Um, the up in the mountains, I would say what what I feared more than avalanches or wild yaks, um, was getting sick. And I got high altitude sickness a number of times. I got, some kind of virus sickness a number of times. And the fear wasn't this sort of, oh, I'm, shaking with fear. It's just, I really don't want to have that happen, because when it does, it's just awful. I mean, when you have to be going to the bathroom constantly and there's no bathroom, uh, and you feel terrible headaches, weakness. I mean, it ruins the experience. And so this, you know, amazingly beautiful experience just turns to crap, and I mean that literally in a certain way. So that was sort of in a way a constant fear. But I lived through an avalanche that killed 3 people. Uh, but at the time when we had to run down this mountainside, I was actually sick, and my brain was working at such a low level. It was just, one foot in front of the other. I wasn't like freaking out with fear. And yeah, I mean, I had an occasional sort of near fall, but nothing that made me think, oh my God, that's terrible, I'll never go back. Now, in kayaking, I did have uh, a scary experience where I guess I would say I felt kind of a physiological fear reaction, because I had gotten lost, and I'm in a kayak by myself at night in the island chain of Palau, and I couldn't find a place to beach the kayak. And I had been paddling for 10 hours, and I was completely exhausted. And then I'm assuming it was a shark, but some sort of big, very large water creature started bumping the bottom of the kayak. And I have to say, there was, I felt, that sort of your heartbeat gets going very fast. uh, and, there was definitely a fear there, although it worked out. And I just calmed myself and chanted uh, my Buddhist mantra of Om Mani Padme Hum, and sang some Christian hymns, and then got my strength back, and it turned into a beautiful experience. One other time, kayaking again in Palau, I kept hearing this strange noise behind me, behind the kayak. It was this kind of whistling, whooshing noise, but quite loud, and it was getting closer. And so I kind of turned my head to the side, and all of a sudden, the back of I'm not sure if it was a humpback whale or a sperm whale, but a huge whale uh, spouted right beside my kayak. I mean, almost close enough to tip it over. And I literally peed my pants. So that was that was definitely a physiological fear response.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing. And uh, because what I'm listening from you is like your life is totally nature driven, wild. You are like a wild person. Like you love the mountains, and you're talking about them as like it's a very friendly thing that you have known for years. You don't have that approach or that perception of they are strange, the mountain is a strange thing. No, they're very familiar to you. Only thing is that you are just away from them. You need to reach there and climb. So that's a very nice friendship there between the nature and the human. I found that I realized that, sensed that. So that's why I was asking this question, because when you are climbing and doing all such wild explorations, how do you see fear, and in what situations? That was my idea. So this is also like nature related. The fear is nature related, and
Well, the one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had in nature, and it 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 seemed like it should have been terrible. I'm trying to get out of the sun that's shining right through my window. That should have been terribly scary was I was in the island nation of Tonga in the Pacific, and had gone on a whale watching cruise, and it wasn't working out because the whales kept servicing far away, and eventually I got off the big whale watching boat onto a small speedboat with some people I had met in Neafu, in the town. And the boat captain said, because my boat is faster and smaller, I can get you close enough to the whales that you can dive out with your snorkel and fins, um, swim up to the whales. And there was a father, mother, and baby whale nearby. And so there were five of us in the boat, and the captain would pull up close, we'd dive in, and we'd start swimming. But every time we'd get in, probably within 100 yards, the whales would take off, and we couldn't catch them. And we kept trying, and finally, the captain said, "Okay, well, this is the last time, because I'm running low on fuel." So we dive in, and we're swimming as fast and hard as we can, and the other members of the group slowly gave up, and I just kept swimming. and I had swam competitively in high school and college, so pretty good swimmer. So eventually, I'm by myself, and the mother and the calf had stopped, and they let me swim right up to them. And the mother's huge eye, I got right up beside her eye, and with my, mask, which is very tiny compared to her eye, we just looked at each other like that. And she just stayed still, and I stayed still, treading water. And then with her fin, she kind of patted her calf, who was on the other side, and the calf swam under the mama whale and came up beside me and let me pet the calf and look into the calf's eye. And then the calf swam back over to the other side of her mother. And then with one great whoosh of her tail, off they went. They dove down deep. And when I got back in the boat, I was shaking so hard I could hardly stand up. But it wasn't fear, it was just the incredible, I mean, wonderful, magical experience of having that connection, although brief as it was, with these two animals was just so amazing. It was just my whole body was just shaking with I never had a feeling like that. Probably the closest thing to it was experiencing the being in the room with the birth of my two children. I mean, I was shaking then too. Uh, but it's like those experiences are so so amazing, so beautiful. And I mean, there's kind of a combination of both fear and thrill and wonder and excitement. It's all this, like all of your extreme feelings and emotions all
Yeah.
are happening at that moment.
Yeah, beautifully explained. I mean, everything at the same time, you know. So,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah, maybe that was love, you know, you experienced in a different way, you know.
I, yeah, I mean, if you're going to pick one word for it, I think love is probably the best.
Yeah, I felt so. I mean, the stillness there, you know, the faith that I'm safe and time just stopped.
Mm, mhm. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I also loved your experience when you were sharing about when you started chanting out of fear, and everything just changed from there. Everything was beautiful, like, you know, from fear to beauty.
Right. Yeah. It's just getting your mind and body in the right place, and the panic dissipating. Yeah.
That was beautiful. Let's listen something about your writing, coaching, and Midsummer Books publishing. How did that happen?
Well, my wife and I are both writers, and she had had quite a few books published, and I'd had a couple, and we each, and her much more than me, had had some bad experiences with agents and publishers. And I think it was 2012, we heard about this new publishing mechanism called Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP. And I had a manuscript that had actually been initially accepted by a publisher, and then the editor of that department got fired, and he said, you can resubmit if you want to, but that we've got this manuscript. Why don't we give this thing a try? And so we published. my book, which is a legal thriller. It was based on a case I had as a lawyer, but I made it much more exciting than the actual case with a couple murders and some arson and things that didn't actually happen in the case. But so and it worked. I mean, it took us an ungodly amount of time to do it because we didn't really know what we were doing, and the technology when Amazon first developed it was a lot cruder than what it is now. But we worked it through. The book went up and was available for sale, and we the royalty rate is much higher than what publishers were paying. Of course, it puts all the burden of marketing on you, but publishers more and more were putting the burden of marketing on authors anyway. Uh, and so we tried it as an experiment, and it worked. And so we decided we would, rather than continue with all of our books to try to work through agents and publishers, we would start using Amazon KDP. And so we created the company Midsummer Books, and we've edited and coached quite a few other writers, but we've limited using the imprint Midsummer Books to just the two of us.
That's interesting, but why?
Well, it's one thing, I guess, to edit somebody's book or coach them through a book, and it's another thing to say, I'm the publisher of this book. It takes on a responsibility that we really didn't want to take on. And plus, since you can do it yourself, and if you want to, you can create your own publishing company. So it's sort of like we will help you all the way, and you can see your book is out there, you can hold it in your hand, but you or the company you create is going to have to be the publisher.
Wow, that's good. So you are making them become independent with whatever skills they need to learn, and then they can launch their book.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of the same with the Basa Village Foundation. We
Yeah.
will help the village to a point, but they've got to own it and they've got to be responsible for it.
Yeah, that's right. So that's wonderful. And I'm just amazed by how doors have opened with your calling and with your attending to what you wanted to do. So this episode is like learning about if you want to do something, then doors are open.
Yeah, the Nike commercial, just do it. I mean, it's kind of trite, but on the other hand, I mean, it's a very deep reality that you can sit around and dream and think about things you'd like to do, but just do it.
Just do it. Yeah. That's what I learned from you. Just do it. Yeah. Yeah. So, would you like to tell something about how you got into writing? What took you there? What was happening?
Well, my mom was a journalist, and so I was, around newspaper writing from childhood. And when I was an early teen, uh, like, 13, 14, thereabouts, I started writing poetry, and it was pretty bad. Uh, the kind of teenage angst poetry, bearing your little soul. But I enjoyed doing it, and I had an English literature teacher. Let's see, she was in ninth grade, um, who thought I had some talent. She was very encouraging. And so I kept writing every now and then some poetry. And by the time I was in college, I actually had a few poems that were published. And then my wife uh, was a writer and it was actually much more serious about it than me. And she had her first book published, I think when she was 21, 22, and she had won a scholarship for writing to out of high school for college. So I've been around writers all my life. My older brother is an editor. So it's, yeah, I guess sort of like in the DNA and in the environment. Um, and for a long time, I didn't feel like I had the time to write a full book, but I had a lot of articles published while I was practicing law, and only a few of them were legal articles. They were mostly travel writing type articles and what I called uh, spiritual adventure travel articles. And so it seemed like, well, there are editors and publishers that think what I write is worthwhile. And eventually, the last year I was practicing law, I finally started taking the time um, to write a book, which was a book about my experience in Nepal and with Basa. And it was called, and I didn't choose this title. I had a different title, but the publisher chose the title, Bringing Progress to Paradise, what I got from giving to a mountain village. I didn't like the Bringing Progress to Paradise because I thought it was a bit of an exaggeration. I mean, in a way, it was true because I thought Basa was beautiful, but it's not I mean, it's not paradise because it's not perfect uh, and bringing progress. I mean, at that point, when the book was published, we'd done the first school project and the electrical project. I think we were just working on the water project, so it didn't seem like I was, you know, bringing all of progress. But anyway, so the marketing department chose the title, and it was a really interesting experience working with really good professional editors on the book, and I liked it, and so then I just kept writing.
That's interesting. I mean, it's all related to your life experiences. So, uh, did you had to really sit down and think, or it was just there and you were just inking in the paper, or you were typing?
Yeah, well, each book I've written, I had a very clear idea, an inspired idea of what the book was about. And so then it was just sitting down and, working out the details and trying to put it, trying to put the idea into a form that would be understandable and enjoyable to readers. And of course, that meant each time a fairly rough first draft, and then working over and over and over and over until either I was convinced this is absolutely perfect or I can't stand to spend another minute on this as one or the other. Uh, was kind of how it's always worked out. Um, but yeah, I never uh, wrote a book that was, oh, you have to write a book, so come up with something. It was always I felt inspired, and now I've actually gone probably about the longest period of time since my last book without starting another. I've written some articles and a short story, but I just haven't felt inspired to do another book. I thought I had one in mind, but then when I started trying to think through it, I was, nah, can't do it. So yeah, so I'm waiting. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
I've given birth to my last child, my last book child.
yeah, yeah. I like your idea of like, no, not yet, not yet. So yeah, you're waiting. Yeah, that's very nice, very natural. Uh, I also have similar experience that you said, like, I'm doing my first children's book. So this entire process of like emailing back and forth, revision, revision, revision. Every time they send me, I sit down and I'm writing, and they are saying the content is just changing the content. There's more content, there are more pages, there you are adding up, adding up. Are you done yet? I'm like, come on. I don't think I'll be ever done. It's so difficult to say that, okay, this is fine, this is the end. It's very difficult. It took a lot of time for me, like, okay, that's it, let's just go for it.
So, is the book still in process, or is the manuscript it's totally done? Is it out
Yeah,
there? Is it public? Oh,
the
what?
manuscript is done, the illustrations are done. uh, it's nearing to publishing.
Oh, great. Well,
Yeah,
be sure and let me know.
yeah, for sure.
I have a grandchild. Uh, so children's book, even though I'm maybe way too old for them.
No, no.
Uh, you're never too old for a good children's book, right?
Well, I think so. I can never be like, I can read any kind of book, book is book. Like, I don't have that
Well, yeah, I
limitation.
no, I think there's really something to that. I mean, a good children's book, even if you're an old fart like me, it can still be a lot of fun. Even if you don't even, I mean, I have a grandchild to read it to, but whether you do or not, I mean, a good book is a good book. Yeah,
I'll definitely share the last revision, the final revision, final draft of the book.
great. Well, my our oldest son does our covers, and he knows how to do graphic computer art, that kind of thing, photoshopping and so forth, which to me is sort of like magic. But I had a friend who was doing a children's book, and so I did the editing for her, and he did the. I mean, she had the drawings by a professional artist, but they needed to be uploaded properly and so forth. And so we worked together on it. And yeah, I mean, it was very different. It's the only one I've ever done. My wife has edited several children's books, but yeah, when she first approached me, I thought, oh man, I mean, I can't do a children's book. But it was quite fun.
I mean, to realize that it is fun, it takes a lot of pausing, You cannot rush and say it's fun. It's like you have to be like, okay, fine. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. So whatever is out in the book is just fine. Breathe in, breathe with
Yeah.
that.
Start chanting if you need to.
Yeah, I love to. Yeah. Anyways, it was very nice talking to you, Jeff. Thank you for
Oh,
sharing your experience and stories. Yeah, it was fun talking to you.
well, thank you, Mamina. It was a lot of fun. I hope we'll get to do it again someday.
Yeah, for
And
sure, definitely, yes. I
and
would
good
love to
luck.
have you back.
Yeah, well, good luck with the book. I mean, is this your first one?
This is my first one, yes, yes.
Uh, it's a wonderful feeling, that first book, and actually holding it in
Can't,
your hand. It's
yeah, I just can't wait when it's going to come to my hand.
yeah, and it seems like
Yeah.
it takes forever too.
Oh my God, yes, yes. It's a lot of time. And I think the delay is from my side because every time they are sending me, I'm like adding more and then there are more pages and there are more illustrations to do and more more stuff to do. So I had to finally take a call, like, okay, be happy. That's it. Let's get done with this. There are other things you can redirect yourself to. So let this be like this.
Well, that's
Yeah.
great. I'll look forward to it and good luck with it.
Thank you so much, Jeff. You have a good night today. Take care, and we hope to see you again. Thank
Wonderful.
you. Namaste.
Bye,
Thank
Mamina.
you. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Okay.